changing the world of work for women everywhere. We are Watermark. We're the only nonprofit women's leadership organization that spans all industries. We connect, develop, and advocate for the advancement of women in the workplace. The Watermark community includes senior executives, entrepreneurs, and emerging executives that support you not only at the top of your field, but also on your way up.
The Silicon Valley Business Journal named Ching Woman of Influence last year, and I'm not the least bit surprised. She has been an active Watermark member since 2015. She is co-lead of our Women Like Us network. And under her leadership and her co-chair, Heather Drahan, that group has doubled. It's just off the charts. It's so much fun. Tina can tell you.
Mary, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Good evening, everyone. I am Ching Valdezco, and I'm really glad to be here with all of you tonight. Excited to see so many familiar faces from Women Like Us, the Watermark Conference, and other Watermark events. As Mary said, I work with a communication skills consulting firm called ExecCom, where I help both women and men learn how to present, write, influence, and negotiate more effectively. We have a strong yet easy philosophy, which is that you are more effective communicator, leader, negotiator when you focus less on yourself and more on the other person. It's easy to say, but not so easy to do in practice, and that's some of what we will do as we go through this discussion tonight. Right? Well, thank you all very much for being here. We start with what you're looking at is a map of the world with markers in different locations where I have colleagues. I have peers at ExecCom who teach similar classes in New York, in Tokyo, in Shanghai, in a number of different locations. I put this up here to remind us that we work with people from many different backgrounds and perspectives, whether we're traveling or working with different countries, or even here in the Bay Area. So many of us in this room have moved here from Germany, from Singapore, from many different parts of the world. And if you keep cultural nuances in mind as you apply what you learned today, you'll be successful no matter where you go. Let's start with a question. What does negotiation mean to you? So when somebody says negotiation, what comes to mind?
Arguing.
Arguing? Yeah, that's the first thing often that we think about. Right? Getting what I want. Middle ground, right? Finding a compromise.
Win-win.
Win-win. That's the model that many of us have been taught to work towards. Mind games? Sometimes that happens, right?
I think discussing terms to get to an ultimate goal.
Yeah, so discussing terms and maybe bargaining to be able to get to an ultimate goal. Right, between different parties, and it's not always just two parties. Sometimes it's more.
Yeah, so bartering or bargaining.
Bartering and bargaining. Competition. So there's so many different ways that we've all experienced negotiations. We've seen everything from the highly competitive, I want to win and get what I want, to a more collaborative model, something that's win-win, where we're focused more on the relationship and how we can keep working together. So there's many different forms that negotiation can take. Why negotiate? Why is it important to learn how to be an effective negotiator?
Everybody wants to be heard.
Everybody wants to be heard. We want to be heard, and our counterpart in that negotiation also wants to be heard.
To get our own way.
To get our own way. Many of us are here in business. Watermark is such a strong professional women's organization, and for us to be successful in our careers, we have goals, we have objectives, we have results that we need to deliver. How are we able to make that happen?
To hear the other's perspective.
Right, to hear the other perspective. A negotiation isn't always just about us. The more we can learn about the other person, the more effective we are at getting the other person to share, then we can figure out how to give them what they need so that they can give us what we want. Right?
To work effectively together moving forward.
Yes, to work effectively together moving forward. Many of us don't often think of ourselves as being negotiators or being somebody whose job relies on negotiating, but the reality is we are all negotiating in every interaction that we have, right? Whether we know it, whether we like it or not, every interaction that we have is an opportunity to gain support for our recommendations, to keep building that relationship and keep moving things forward. Who in the room is in a sales or client-facing role? A lot of negotiations there, right? How many people are managing suppliers or working with vendors? Also negotiations. How many people manage a team, right? How much of that is negotiating? How many people have a boss to whom they need to provide some deliverables, right? That's pretty much all of us. Even when you run your own company, that just means everybody is your boss. And in all of those situations, we are negotiating. We are negotiating with the other person that we're working with, and we're looking for ways to find some common ground or some agreement with that person. So why negotiate? These skills are helpful not just in work, but also in life, right? So much of our negotiation happens outside the corporate world. They're with our family, with our kids, with our friends, with our loved ones. So these are skills you can use all the time, not just in a conference room, not just on a project team. So our agenda for today, you will learn negotiation concepts and techniques. I'll dive a little bit deeper into 3 specific areas: how to plan and use currencies, what they are, how to probe to uncover information, learn more about the other person, and a few tips that you can use as you start to get into that bargaining process. Normally we teach this as a 1 or sometimes 2-day workshop, so it might feel in the space of an hour that we're only scratching the surface. I want to leave you with the information that you need to go deeper if you want, and some resources where you can learn more if that's helpful. In front of each of you, there's a handout somewhere in the packet that's on your seats. You'll see a handout that looks like this. That's got space for you to write in some of the exercises that we're going to do in just a moment. And if you'll flip over to the next page where it says Negotiation Skills Checklist, you'll see a list of reminders that will be helpful after today. But also at the very bottom of that page, you'll see a URL and a course code underneath where it says Easy Learn Online Course Content. If you don't have the handout, there should be a few over here, or try the seats behind you. Find a chair that does have a handout, because I want to make sure that you each get access to the notes. Who else is missing a handout and needs one? All right. Great. So see where it says Easy Learn Online Course Content. You'll see a URL and a course code. What that course code gives you access to is all the content that I'm going to share with you today, and the content that we share in the full day version of this class. So even though we're only here for an hour, I know for sure I won't be able to answer all of the questions in the space of between now and 7:30. But you can go deeper if you want by accessing the content that's available to you online. What that also means is that although you're, of course, very welcome to take notes, don't feel that you have to, because you'll have the material available to you after today. So let's start with negotiation concepts and techniques. 3 approaches to negotiations. In negotiations theory, there's 3 different approaches that we look at. There's competitive negotiations, cooperative negotiations, and collaborative negotiations. What's the difference between each of these 3? The competitive negotiations are what we often fear when we're coming into an interaction. Somebody who is a hard negotiator, who's going to push, wants to win as much as possible. And for people who are taking that competitive approach, sometimes it can feel like, for me to win, the other person has to lose. It's a very confrontational way of negotiating. A cooperative negotiation is one that we hear about in a lot of the academic models, right? It's win-win. How do we come up with a solution or compromise that's fair for everyone? And while that's good, and in many cases it's a nice outcome, it's not always the best possible outcome. Compromise isn't always the best solution. Collaborative negotiation is going beyond win-win to find the best possible outcome for both parties. A friend of ours who is a former FBI hostage negotiator, you might have seen him at a Watermark event. His name is Chris Voss, and he has a great book called Never Split the Difference. He gives this example that illustrates the difference between the three approaches. Think about perhaps two sisters who are arguing about an orange. Right? A competitive negotiation is, I want the orange and I don't want you to have it. Right? I want as much of the orange as possible, and for me to win, I feel like I should get all of it, the entire thing. A cooperative negotiation might be the two sisters deciding to split the orange in half, and each sister gets one half of the orange. That seems pretty fair, right? We each get some of what we want, and we each give up something of what we want so that the other person gets something too. The collaborative negotiation's going a little bit further than that. In a collaborative negotiation, we're negotiating from interests rather than positions. And it helps to have a good understanding of not just what the other person wants, but why it's important to them. So imagine in this situation, maybe those two sisters having a conversation, or maybe their mother brokering a discussion to understand, why do you want the orange? What do you want to do with it? You might find that one sister wants the outside of the orange peel to make chocolate-covered candied orange peel, which is really great. So I would totally understand wanting the orange for that reason. So maybe one sister wants the orange peel so that she can make candy. And perhaps the other sister wants the inside of the orange so that she can make juice. In this scenario, having that understanding, it's possible for both of the sisters to get exactly what they want. And in this case, there isn't a compromise that means giving up part of what you're looking for. And you can both get the best possible outcome. So wherever we can, that's the ideal that we would like to get. We can't always get to it in every negotiation, but when we can, it's a much more powerful outcome than just what we often think of as win-win. The 6 stages of negotiation. What's a process that you can use to help guide you through planning for your negotiations? First, strategize, right? Plan ahead. Before you go into the negotiation, know what you're looking for. Set the climate. You want to set a positive climate for your negotiation. Obtain information. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. State position, so share your position and your understanding of the other person's position. Bargain. This is what many times we think about when we're going into a negotiation. And then finally, ideally, getting to an agreement and being able to implement that agreement. Out of these 6 stages, which stage do you think is the most important in a successful negotiation? So number 3, obtain information. Number 2, set the climate. Number 1, strategize. It's helpful to know what you want. So all of these stages are important, but the one that can make the biggest difference is stage 3, obtaining information. This is the stage that has the potential to change the entire tone and the entire outcome of the negotiation that you're in. We'll start with stage 1, strategize. What do you do before you go into your negotiation? You start by strategizing price or also terms. Know that not every negotiation comes down to money, even though it might seem like that's what the negotiation is about. You start by thinking about what you want, what the other person wants, and also your walkaway position. If you've read the classics from Harvard, this is your best alternative to a negotiated agreement, or BATNA. If you know what your walkaway position is, you can't be pressured into accepting a bad deal. And sometimes a bad deal is actually worse than not having a deal at all. Another great example that Chris Voss used in his Watermark talk was about a husband and a wife, maybe talking about the husband getting ready to go out for the evening. He's wearing black shoes, and the wife feels that he would maybe look better wearing brown shoes. What does a compromise look like in that situation? Right? A bad deal, 1 black shoe and 1 brown shoe is worse than either of the alternatives. So know that sometimes splitting things down the middle or reaching a bad agreement is actually worse than not reaching an agreement at all. So know your walkaway position, and that will help you from getting stuck in those types of situations. Next, identify your currencies. What are your currencies? Your currencies are your medium of exchange. These are things that you can trade, what you can exchange during the course of the negotiation. At the same time, you want to be mindful of existing conditions. These are things that you can't change. They're just facts about the situation. They might be benefits to you or the other person, but they can't be traded because they are what they are. If you take the example of somebody selling a house, the currencies might be offering to update the windows so that they're energy efficient, landscaping the property, or maybe applying a new coat of paint. These are currencies because the homeowner can offer to do them. They're not obligated to. Or the buyer can ask the homeowner to do them. Right? So they may or may not happen depending on what the two parties agree. Existing conditions, on the other hand, they're just facts. You can't change anything about them. So in this example of the house, existing conditions might be the house being in a good school district, or the house having a park nearby, or the size of the lot. Right? There's not much you can change about that once you already own the house. But depending on where the house is and the condition of the neighborhood, these are things that might make your house more attractive to certain types of buyers. So know your currencies and your existing conditions. Plan your currencies. So the more currencies you have on your list, the more flexibility you have in coming to an agreement or finding an agreement that works well for both you and the other party. So these are many times other things besides money. If you are thinking about applying for a new job, maybe negotiating a promotion, what are some of the things that might be your currencies? Your job title is a currency. The timing of when you start or when you're available. How much time off you take or when you might take it. The scope of your responsibilities, opportunities for professional development. And I'm sure you could all imagine, maybe you're talking to a company where the salary scale is pretty fixed and they can't do anything about salary because everybody has to be within this range. But your manager might have a budget for professional development and maybe willing to support you to attend a conference that you're really interested in or come and take one of our classes. So these are things that you can negotiate that might come from a different bucket than salary where perhaps that manager's hands are tied. So the more you have on your list of things that you could potentially want, the higher likelihood that you might be able to get some of the things that you're looking for. And the more you have on your list of things that you could give the other person, then again, the more likelihood that you'll be able to give them something that they need so that they can give you something that you want. So planning your strategy, all of you have those handouts. Think about one situation that you're negotiating. So if you'll flip back to the very first page, think about one negotiation that you have coming up, one request you might be getting ready to make, one interaction that you have. What is that situation? What are you negotiating about, and who are you negotiating with? So take a moment to list down on that handout, what is that negotiation about, who is it with, and think about your objectives and currencies. What do you want out of that negotiation? And maybe one or two currencies that you have. So what are maybe two things that you want to ask for? And what are maybe two things that you can offer the other person, your counterpart in that negotiation? Well, let me give you a couple of minutes to do that now. So who would like to share a little bit about what is your next negotiation that you think might be coming up? And what are some of the currencies that you might ask for or that you might be able to offer? Yes.
Hi, my name is Parul, and my negotiation, I think, is very common with most of us, a salary increase. So I have the talk coming up in next 2 months. So what do I want to ask for? I want to ask for a salary bump to my immediate manager. And what can I offer? So I work for a technology consulting company, Slalom. It's right here on Spear Street. I'm a great consultant. I've gotten always awesome feedback from my clients. I'm very actively involved in Slalom's culture. I'm part of Women's Leadership Network, and I attended Watermark conference for them. So I'm a great ambassador of Slalom. I also mentor a lot of young consultants. So those are my currencies that I'm offering right now.
Right. So great, very relatable scenario. All of us are either in that situation or have been in that situation or will be soon, right? Negotiating a salary increase. And when you're negotiating a salary increase, some of the currencies that you might have, definitely you are asking for the salary bump. But you might also be flexible on, do you want a title change along with that or level change? How soon do you need it to happen? And what are you willing to give in return? So you might be taking on some additional responsibilities, whether it's for coaching or leading others, or responsibilities leading or delivering on a project. So there's many different ways that you can approach that conversation. It's not just about, here's my number, what's yours? And the right time to have that conversation is another thing that you might consider as you're planning your strategy. If you are negotiating a promotion or a salary increase, when is the right time to have that discussion?
Right after you've done something fabulous.
Right after you've done something fabulous, that's always helpful, right? When they're creating the new budget. So being mindful about how your company works and knowing the process can help you think about when is the right opportunity. Normally, during the performance review season is too late to have that discussion. And you certainly want to have that discussion right after you've done something fabulous, but you also want to have the discussion before you go off and do that fabulous thing. Because then you can start to position, okay, if I deliver, right, on these goals, if I do X, if I do Y, what impact might this have on our promotion planning? You want to make sure that the currencies that you're offering are the ones that the other person cares about. It might be that what we thought was a fabulous project is actually not high on your leadership team's priority list. So it's helpful to know that beforehand. Thanks for sharing that example. So that leads us into stage 2 of negotiation, is setting the climate. Once you know what you want and what you're looking for, what you could potentially offer, what can you do to set a positive climate as you go into that conversation or that discussion? So set the climate. You want to, if you're aiming for collaborative or cooperative negotiation, you want to establish that cooperative atmosphere right up front. You'd like to be conversational, positive, relational, energetic. We reflect a lot of what we perceive from other people. So if you go into that conversation and you're tense, you're nervous, you're uncomfortable, your manager or your counterpart will pick up on that. Even if they don't sense it consciously, they'll sense that you're uncomfortable and it will make them uncomfortable working with you. So the best thing that you can do for yourself is to come in relaxed with a positive mindset. Sean Acor spoke at the Watermark conference. He's been doing a lot of research on happiness, and one of the studies has shown that our minds can work up to 31% more effectively when we are in a positive frame of mind. So it helps you to be in a positive frame of mind as you go into your negotiation, and it helps put the other person in a positive frame of mind as well. And both in our presentation skills classes, influencing and negotiations, we do a lot of work on body language and showing you. We'll record you, just like we're doing recording here, so that you can see how your body language looks and how other people might perceive you as you're having that conversation. You can do that very simply. If you're practicing on your own, just take your phone, ask a friend or a colleague to record you as you practice if it's a particularly critical conversation. Notice your body language, and how about you react to it if you imagine yourself sitting on the other side of the table. So stage 3 of negotiations is what we talked about, the most important stage, obtaining information. Chris Voss also said negotiation is an information gathering process, right? All throughout the negotiation, really at every part of it and as you get ready for your negotiation. What are some of the things that you can do to be more effective at obtaining information? Probe to uncover issues. Do more asking and less telling. Sometimes when we go into a negotiation, we think, oh, we want to make sure that we tell the other person what we want, and we want to be heard. But if you go into a meeting and you're the only one who does any talking, you're going to leave that meeting without learning anything more than what you already knew when you walked in. So see how you can do more asking and less telling. If you're trying to influence somebody else, you'll be more effective the more you can get them to share and the more you can get them to talk. So if I'm trying to influence somebody or if I'm coaching somebody in influencing skills, I might suggest to aim for 80% them talking and you listening, and 20% of the time you talking and sharing information. How do you encourage others to share in a conversation? Ask open-ended questions. So generally, these are questions that, for example, start with what or how. They're open-ended because you can't answer them with a simple yes or no, right? They're not did you, will you, could you, should we, right? If you say what or how, it forces the other person to engage more deeply with that question. Why isn't on the list? It can be a good question to ask sometimes. The thing about why is sometimes we can feel a little bit defensive when we get asked the why question. And again, it's not always something that happens consciously, but instead of asking why, I might ask what made you do that or what caused you to reach that decision, right? To ask it in a bit of a more neutral way. Tone, coming back to body language, tone is pretty important. I would not ask, why did you do that, right? What does that say to the other person? It says, I'm already judging you, right, before you've even had the chance to speak. Another way to uncover issues and to learn more about what the other person wants is to confirm what you've just heard. So you might say things like, it sounds like, or if I understand correctly, and then repeat what you just heard. Let the other person confirm. And in many cases, they might add more information, they might clarify, and it's important for you to discover if you've perhaps misunderstood something or misinterpreted something that they said. Some people aren't very open to answering direct questions. They're uncomfortable. We talk about different types of negotiation styles. Some people's communication styles, they're reluctant to answer a direct question. And in that case, just confirming and playing back what you feel you've heard or what you've sensed gives them a less threatening avenue for sharing that information with you. So examples of open questions: what are your concerns? How did you determine your price? It's a great one to ask both clients about their budget and vendors about the solution that they're offering. What makes this issue a priority for you? Right? It helps you understand more about why the other party wants what they want. And what would be helpful for you? Which is a great all-purpose question that can help you to learn more about the other person. When I am out of questions and I have no idea what to ask next, that's the one that I asked, right? What would be helpful for you, or what would be most helpful for you? Just because you ask that question doesn't obligate you to do whatever the other person says. So just because you said what would be most helpful for you, maybe they'll say 3 things that they would find helpful. Maybe you don't agree with 1 or 2. That's fine. Don't do them. But perhaps you agree with the 3rd one, and that's something that you can do to then move the discussion and the interaction forward. I will ask, maybe Alyssa in the group, we've got these blue cards that serve as a great reminder of questions that you might ask when you're in an interaction. So I'll ask Alyssa to hand them out, and if you'll just pass them down to the others who are in your row. So on those cards, you'll see a set of questions that you might ask in your interactions. There'll be questions like, what would be helpful to you? Or would it be helpful if I do X? Would it be helpful if I do X is a more positive way, a more relatable way of making a recommendation or suggestion rather than saying, I think we should do this. Right? So if you put it in the form of the question, it allows the other person to feel that they have more control, and it makes them more likely to say yes to you and to agree. Focused listeners use you statements. We talked about confirming what you heard. So you statements begin with, it looks like you, or it seems like you feel, or it looks like budget is important to you, or it looks like schedule is important to you, right? These are ways of paraphrasing, summarizing, and just playing back what you heard, whether it's concerns or what the other person likes about what you've recommended. Again, this is a nice neutral way of making sure that you have the right information, correcting any misunderstandings, and building empathy and rapport, which many times that's what we're looking for in that interaction. We all have worked with at least one person in our lives and in our careers who just wanted to feel that you understood them, right? They might come on really strong and wanting to get their way, but once they see that you get where they're coming from, then they're happy to trust you to make the right decision. If you can get to that sort of breakthrough, that comes from empathy and building rapport. And that empathy is not you telling the other person, I understand you. It's you reflecting what you understood in the same way that they might share that thought or share that concern, and them saying, yes, that's right, you get it. So our exercise, again, going back to that next negotiation scenario that you think you might have. What questions might you ask in that scenario? And how can you learn more about what your counterpart values? So just take a moment to think about what's one or two open-ended questions. I'll leave this example up here. What's one or two open-ended questions that you might ask in your next negotiation to help you learn a little bit more about the other person and what is truly important to them?